Welcome to the ChangeMakers in CRE, a podcast by Re-Leased.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the ChangeMakers in CRE. I'm your host, Tom Wallace. I'm the founder and CEO of Re-Leased with commercial property management software. And I'd like to welcome along Brad Krauskopf. Brad is the CEO and founder of Hub Australia, a premium co-working provider. Welcome along, Brad.
G'day. Nice to be here today. Thanks for the intro.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for joining us. Look, I just thought we'd start with a bit of background. You want to just tell us a bit about Hub Australia and your role as the founder and CEO?
Yeah, sure. Look, CEO just means cat of all trades, and constantly trying to keep people aligned with where things are going, which at the rate of change that things seems to be going in the workspace at the moment, keeps you busy. Look, Hub, I founded Hub back in 2011. It came across co-working off the back of the GFC, actually, when I was living and working in Europe. That's when co-working, got its first big kick along, largely off the back of freelancers looking to come together at spaces and escape the isolation of working at home. And Hub was certainly one of those spaces that focused on early stage startups, freelancers, not-for-profits, back in its first 5 years. But I like to say we almost started again in 2016. That was when we really pivoted to being a premium provider and had that recognition that we were actually a hospitality company. And, ultimately it's our job each day to create workspaces that people love. As soon as we did that, and it kind of came off the back of whenever I was talking to our customers, the single biggest reason I was hearing over and over again as to why they chose Hub was because we helped them attract and retain the best talent. Mm-hmm. I mean, it wasn't the cheap desk. It wasn't the podcast studio. It's actually, sometimes it was the cafe, but it wasn't always all of the things that you might have thought. And then as soon as we realized that the segment and our real value add was around being like a tool in the toolbox for a business to say, hey, these guys can help me activate a workspace that my team will love, and I can get on with running my business. Our business model then pivoted towards, most customers that were coming to Hub were growing businesses, and that eventually settled at around about 50% of our customers being businesses that had anywhere from 10 to 50 people in at Hub. Yep. And then that's complemented now by a lot of enterprise customers. And then, and I'll only touch on this one now because I'm sure we'll come to it later, landlords are now also our customer, rather than just our landlord.
I love that. I think you probably have some pretty cool stories of early stage companies who joined you as a small company, and I mean, hopefully some of them became some of your enterprise customers. Imagine if you're helping them grow and bring and retain talent.
Yeah, look, it's super great hearing and seeing those growing businesses. We had in particular a legal firm now. They've been with us for 10 years, and as it's gone on, they've been growing and growing and growing. And and more recently, we'll have a scale up, so Canvas in there, and then also let me see, what are some other good examples?
Canvas like beyond a scale up now. They're in the stratosphere now.
Yeah, so I guess that's more like an example of an enterprise customer that we've got.
Awesome.
Increasingly, what we'll find is that businesses will come to us, and it's for that period that they're growing from 10, 20 people up to 200 people, where it's just impossible for them to predict, what are their workspace requirements are going to be. Actually, the name came to me now, Salem, an example where these guys have literally gone from 20 to a couple of hundred people over the time that they've been at Hub in a couple of year period. Now, you put that into your conversation with a real estate agent about how much space should I lease, and they, then 3 to 5 year lease, and am I leasing that for 200 people or am I leasing that for 20 people? And you know what? I love an Anthony Slumbers quote, like, I don't need the office, I need a productive workforce. And so what we're seeing now is that rise of space as a service.
Yep.
And just like 10 years back, or actually it's probably more like 30 years back, people started to move away from owning their own IT infrastructure to putting that into the cloud and putting that into data centers and consuming their IT infrastructure as a service. Later on we started seeing software as a service, and that had the acronym of SaaS. Now we've got space as a service, and I don't know if software as a service has already got that acronym. So I think we're going with workspace as a service at the moment.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, I love. I've followed Anthony on Twitter, and I met him a few times when I was over in London, and he's he puts out probably the best content I've seen in this industry. He's fantastic. So he's a great guy. Hopefully, he listens to us talk about him. And from our experience as a company, we're a software company with around about 150 people, and we're spread between New Zealand, Australia, the US, and the UK. And just what you talked about, as you were saying, I was like, this is incredibly similar to our journey in London in particular. I moved over there. We had a small team of sort of half a dozen people or so. I moved over there in, I think it was late 2016, 2017. And we moved offices in that time. I was there for a couple of years, and we grew to sort of 30, 40 people. We moved offices 5 times, I think. So we had no chance of sitting there at the start, me sitting there and saying, hey, I want to sign a 5-year lease or a 10-year lease. Like, we had no idea the size we were going to be or how our needs changed. And so, we were able to adapt and change as the sky, and luckily we were able to improve the quality of the office on the way through as well, because in the early days we had some pretty we were in some pretty sort of ropey areas of London and places like the back of Whitechapel, but now we've moved into Holborn. But that flexibility was really, really important to us. We just, as we grew, we couldn't lock into anything.
It's true. Like, think of all of the time that was spent with all of those moves, and also something which look, yes, your company, there is a connection to property there, but you're not in the hardware of property. So so it's essentially spending time that you don't have on something that isn't your main core skill. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've got enough to focus on with our own business, let alone trying to figure all that out across multiple different countries as well. It's too much going on. And I might actually just follow that around now, that trend there. Like, I think there's some real similarities between space as a service and software as a service. Like, if I think about how we run our business, it's because our customers are on shorter term contracts, and they effectively rent our software rather than the traditional way of acquiring the software. It's really important that we understand how customers use the software, how satisfied they are, how happy they are with everything, because we obviously want to have the longest possible relationship we can with them. And I imagine really similar relationship used to be sign a long lease. Landlord doesn't really think about it. They might fix the roof if it leaks bad enough. But now obviously you really want to understand how those customers are, how they're finding the space, how satisfied they are. So how do you keep in touch with your customers or your tenants? I'm not sure how you refer to them, but how do you keep in touch? How do you see how they're interacting with the space, and how they're enjoying it or not, and how likely they are to stick around with you?
Yeah, sure thing. So we think of the business as the customer,
yep,
and then their team are the members.
Great.
Is how we think about how we think of the people that use our spaces. So as a business, we do operate at the premium end, and with as not a technology company, I would call us a high touch organization. So certainly we have more staff members per member than our competitors. And some of our competitors are going, that's very unproductive, or we kind of actually see it as part of our differentiator with how we provide have more staff members there for the business, for our customers. But that allows us to have first-hand knowledge. So it's not like we have like a survey, or we get to see information every 6 months, which we do through surveys. But there's nothing like, being in the same workspace with your customer. In fact, it's almost like an unfair advantage. Like, I'm actually in the same room with my customer most of the time. Now that enables us to get feedback and respond really quickly and adapt our product. Now, where software as a service has a completely unfair advantage, and I'm so envious of them, is that, when they need to scale something or change something, they might change a line of code, or they might call up Microsoft and get a few more gigs or whatever on the server. It's a whole lot slower when I have to call a landlord and get them to change something, or go and lease another square meter of space and fit it out. But it's still easier for me to do that than my customer, the business. What we are seeing, though, is that because the terms are flexible, that business, my customer, can choose which flex workspace provider is right for them. And look, I think it's a terrible made up word of hotelification, or
that is a terrible word.
It is. I've heard it a few times, but I guess it does kind of put you in the picture. And I guess the key bit that I'd ask people to take from it is, we're seeing brands really emerge as critically important, both in the flex workspace industry, but also for landlords, where that brand says something about what the quality of the building is, what the standard of the experience is. And then, when you go on a holiday and you choose to, I don't know, you're at the Hyatt, or you're at the Marriott, or you're at the Novotel, or you're at the W, each one of those brands said something different about you.
Yep.
And really importantly, it said something about your business. And so where your business chooses to stay is where your staff stays. It's where your customers rock up to their office, and all of those kinds of things. So what we've found in Flex is that people are choosing Hub because they're trying to pitch at a certain level. And then we're also seeing landlords. I'm a big believer that no one landlord can probably pick a single flex operator to cover all of their assets, because you've got to start with the building, and then you've got to build a brand around that building and around that location. And in the moment something doesn't connect and it doesn't become a cohesive package, then the offering gets diluted. So that's where some landlords are choosing Hub, where they're trying to create a certain kind of experience, which is the hospitality, and it's the premium, and it's the national network.
Yeah, I think that super interesting. I think that I don't know if they started, but they certainly made it the most prominent with WeWork coming in and building a brand around commercial real estate. And they're probably testing now the adage that any publicity is good publicity. I'm not sure how they're finding that at the moment. But super interesting as you're talking about, and actually really interesting as you say, like now seeing everyone was initially branded or bucketed as space as a service or co-working, and now we're seeing people figure out where in the stack they sit, whether the premium provider, whether the sort of low cost provider, whether they specialize in certain types of businesses. It's just interesting to see that the industry sort of mature as it rolls out and gets into its sort of second decade. You talked about landlords. I'd be really interested to understand a lot of our customers. Obviously, we sell directly to landlords who will be interested to hear this. How do you work with landlords? What makes it great? Do you have examples of this just a fantastic relationships and the impact that has?
Yeah, sure. And look, so no secret. Like we are just like everybody else from let's call it the previous decade. We were doing the traditional long-term leases, the big incentives, and what forth. And we need not forget that. I see co-working and what happened in the what do we call it? The noughties, 2010 to 2020. That was the latest iteration of something that's been happening for ages, like, serviced offices, business centers, co-working.
Regis.
Regis, exactly. And now I think we're going to move into, the 2020s will be the space as a service is what it'll become. I know it be referred to as. I think ultimately we are going to be looking at the landlord playing a much bigger role, because now what we've seen is that co-working, for all intents and purposes as well, is an amenity that provides the overall mix in an asset. But I guess more importantly, we're going to see real estate more and more being about the customer. So we have this saying at Hub, from meters squared to people squared. And so you've got the customer, which is the business, which is ultimately needing to answer to its staff. At the moment, we do have a balance of power where it's very much shifted to the staff with the shortage of labour. That will ebb and flow. But certainly at the moment, we know who's calling the shots. Now, what that means is that the poor, property workplace person in a company, their job has got a whole lot more difficult, they need to be able to cater to lots of different working styles on lots of different days. And importantly, they need to be able to create an experience, because people know that they don't have to go to the office in order to get work done. So you have to create an experience that makes the cost of the commute seem small, and the experience has to be something that's so much bigger and better than what I'd get by sitting at the kitchen table.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the good news is, people do want to be a part of something bigger. Like people love that. They want to be able to connect with their co-workers. They want to be able to do some participate in a city environment. So all of those things mean that people are going to keep on coming back into the workplace. But then bringing this all the way back to the landlord, the landlord has been asked now to provide things for its tenants that it just simply wasn't set up to do.
Yep.
Landlords often deal in years and even decades, and they do deal in square meters necessarily, because they have to finance and they have to fit out and they have to do all of these things. But the landlord still wants to attract that big tenant, that big covenant, that money that gets their building out of the ground, and then it gives them a great yield that they can then on sell and get a good value for their building. But to get all of those things and to have those great tenants that do that, they've got to create an experience in that building that it is more than what they have previously been expected to do. And this was already happening pre-pandemic, but now suddenly they're expected to do it like now. And asking a landlord to do, or even us Flex to ask us to do it now, it's very hard, because you've got to move so many pieces around the puzzle, and also mobilize the cash to do it. And I guess where that's ending up is that landlords are needing to lean on partners such as hubs, such as other operators, in ways that they haven't had to before. And that's creating some really great experiences, like so for Brookfield. So Brookfield in Sydney, we operate the business lounge for them on level 11 at Brookfield Place, which has come out of the train station. Big brand new premium building. NAB is a client, one of Australia's large banks, and we run that business lounge for them. In a premium building in Canberra for APG, our landlord there, we run the lobby concierge, the business centre, and then we also do happen to have a hub, flex and co-working space in there as well. One other one that I'll mention, so on behalf of a landlord, we're doing a white label management of a whole of building. It's called Urinma Place. It's in Darlinghurst in which is just an inner fringe suburb of Sydney. And in that place in this space, they're looking to bring together a whole bunch of different impact projects and what forth. And there we're managing the cafe, the concierge, in conjunction with other operators there, a flex space, and then the overall building activation. And, so all of these things go way beyond that initial remit of I'll get a co-working operator to take a lease.
Just in. Yeah. You've mentioned cafe a few times. How important is the quality of the coffee?
It's
for a success.
It's like it's part of it. It's actually listed as one of like part of how we differentiate. The coffee's got to be amazing.
Do you personally test every cafe before it goes through?
I personally test them as often as possible. It's interesting. We used to see, so the member kitchen always used to traditionally be the heart of the hub in all co-working spaces. It still is for members, but what we see is, each year, I guess expectations become increasingly higher of the service that is expected, but particularly it may also be more because of our pivot towards a premium product. So what we see there is that the cafe and in particular the coffee that we serve there, it has to be, like you'd expect at a great cafe down a laneway in Melbourne or at a luxury hotel.
Yep. I mean, if one if one great thing comes out of this, it's just no more bad coffee wherever we go, then I'll be pretty happy. I'd call it a success. So I mean, we're getting into the murky world of post-COVID predictions. I was hoping to not go down this path, but we're sort of circling around it. I think it's particularly important and relevant here. Are you willing to boldly make a stab at what you see the return to office looking like? Do you think will be like? I completely agree that from where we stand as a company as well, we completely agree that in a world that you can do most things online, right? You can socialize online, you can work online. You don't have to leave the house, but people want to, right? And I think we all agree that commercial real estate plays a really important role in an economy and thriving societies. No one wants to see empty buildings, empty office spaces, empty retail shops, no cafes. Like, it's a part of the community and part of what makes a city or a town great. So we see it as really important, but obviously it's changing, right? The pandemic will change things permanently. You know, do you see any major changes? There a return to work? Do you see a place for B-grade office space, for example, going forward? Or just give us an insight to how you think about all of that post-pandemic as we eventually get to that point.
Yeah, sure. Look, I guess what I would start off by saying is that it'll be a terrible waste of a good crisis if we don't change the office. Like, we've kind of forgotten, but like I've read stats where like 85% of people were disengaged with their workplace pre-pandemic. And you know, like, why would you want to have so many people for so much of your life not enjoying the space that you were going to? Like, it just makes no sense. And you know, we always had technologies, the excuse as to why I couldn't do it. But of course, that excuse is gone, and we realize that, you know, it was all because of bad managers and culture and everything in the first place. But look, we need to adapt and change. And look, one thing is, you know, I'm Gen X. You know, one thing as a Gen X, resisting going back to the workplace, and you know, I want to go back to the workplace. But a millennial and a Gen Z, which make up, I think it's 2025, they'll be 75% of the workforce, meaning like Gen X and baby boomer are, you know, well and truly in the minority. You know, these guys grew up in a digital world and are much more used to connecting online. So I think we are going to see this change. And like, I'm in Melbourne, which, you know, unfortunately we have the unfortunate record of the most lockdown city in the world. We cracked 200 days of lockdown, or stay-at-home orders, as it's sometimes called.
Brutal time.
Over the course of the pandemic. But so, you know, and we have genuinely seen there that even in Australia, so Melbourne is bouncing back slower than what we've seen in other cities. And I guess I don't so much use the word bouncing back. I think what we've seen is a more permanent shift in terms of how people are going to work, for instance, in a Melbourne versus a Sydney versus, for instance, in Brisbane. You know, Brisbane, to the north, there's the Sunshine Coast, and to the south, there's the Gold Coast, which some people may have heard of. But, you know, so what you've got there is work spread out over, you know, over a couple of hundred kilometres from Sunshine Coast down to the Gold Coast. It's just how cities are operating is very different. Now, look, for instance, if I had the choice,
if I was in Brisbane, if I had the choice to be in Brisbane or the Gold Coast or Sunshine Coast, I'd probably choose the Sunshine Coast. I'd probably be at the beach if I had that choice.
I'd be in Sunshine Coast, whether it's in the beach or in the hinterland. But yeah, I'd be Sunshine Coast.
Brisbane's pretty nice, but those areas are pretty special.
They are, and certainly, like, in pre-pandemic, we would not have seen ourselves justifying getting there. But post-pandemic, you know, I do see us being in Sunshine Coast and Gold Coast, and then having another couple of Brisbane locations in the suburban areas because of how you know, how things are actually spreading out. Specifically, back to a couple of those, I do think that there is going to be that continued flight to quality of premium and A-grade assets. You know, and that aligns exactly with, if you need an experience that's so damn good that I'm going to get out from behind the kitchen desk, and even worse, I'm going to brave the commute, I've got to go to something that's really high quality. Now, I don't think that means that there won't be a space for B-grade offices. But if you're thinking that you're not going to have to redevelop it or invest further in the experience that you create around that asset, then I think that there's going to be a bit of pain coming, because a B grade asset, exactly as it was pre-pandemic, will have all the more demands put on it and have to work all the more harder to attract tenants as we come out on the other side. I think a lot of people love to say, "Oh, we'll just reposition it as a residential asset." I don't know a lot about that, but I do know enough to know that that is a lot easier said than done.
I don't know. I know of a number of projects where they found that a lot harder than they, because those.
Yeah.
I mean, the main example I know about is, I've seen this a few times, where office buildings have all of the bathrooms and amenities in one place, right, in the center of the building, and then suddenly you want to have plumbing all the way through into every room, multiple rooms. That becomes very expensive and very hard, and sometimes not possible with the ceiling, floor to ceiling height ratios. So it sounds great. I know the plumbing in particular is not easy and very expensive.
Not thinking that residential apartments with shared bathrooms are going to exactly suddenly come in favour.
No, it's hard to see that taking flight, to be honest. Yeah.
But what we can see though is, so around, it's not just work. In fact, it's probably not even work is the major reason that you're going into the cities. So this is where I do still see there is that spot for B grade office space, because what it is, it's about the experience and the amenity around that building. And in fact, that's actually probably going to be the more important thing, because what I wanted, the cafes, I want to be able to go to an arts show after work. I want to have all manner of different lunch options. I want to be able to pick up or try on the clothes that I was going to buy on the online, in the online portal. And it's kind of like I've made a journey out of my city that day. And you know what? Yeah, I'm going to drop in for 2 hours to see my team so I can get to know them all. So that's where the B grade building has a role. But what we need to be thinking about is how do we evolve our cities and not fight this change that has come about, but thrive because of it, because we can make the experiences much more intentional. And it's hard, but we've got to figure out how to bring all of those different parties to the table. And we'll end up with some amazing cities that, and I know this is a different angle, but that'll be much more sustainable, that'll be much more keeping activity local, and the people feel much more a part of. And that's what's exciting about this.
Yeah, no, incredibly exciting. I mean, we see it as it's hard to do, but it creates an immense opportunity for those who are willing to think differently, to embrace the change, and to create something new that's more relevant to a sort of society's needs in this day and age, in a post-pandemic age. And hence the name ChangeMakers in CRE here. That's why I wanted to highlight you. I think it's a perfect point to end this off, Brad. Thank you so much for your time. It's been fantastic to hear your story with Hub Australia. Congratulations on all your success, and we look forward to following your story in the next few years.
Thanks for the opportunity to have a chat today.
Of course. Thanks, Brad.